So we're in Isaiah 58, going to go down to verse 10. And you will grant to the hungry one your own soulful desire, and you will satisfy the soul that is being afflicted. Your light also will certainly flash up even in the darkness, and your gloom will be like midday. Luke 11. In reply, he would say to them, let the man that has 2 undergarments share with the man that has none, and let him that has things to eat do the same. Now we're in Leviticus, and we're going to read 9 through 10. And when you people reap the harvest of your land, you must not reap the edge of your field completely, and the gleaning of your harvest you must not pick up. Also, you must not gather the leftovers of your vineyard, and you must not pick up the scattered grapes of your vineyard. For the afflicted one and the alien resident, you should leave them. I am Jehovah, your God. Exodus chapter 23, going to go down to verse 11. But the 7th year you are to leave it uncultivated, and you must let it lie fallow. And the poor ones of your people must eat of it, and what is left over by them, the wild beasts of the field are to eat. That is the way you are to do with your vineyard and your olive grove. Now we are in Job 31. We're going to go through 16 to 20. If I used to hold back the lowly ones from their delight, and the eyes of the widow I would cause to fail, and I used to eat my morsel by myself, while the fatherless boy did not eat from it. For from my youth he grew up with me as with a father, and from the belly of my mother I kept leading her. If I used to see any perishing from having no garment, or that the poor one had no covering, if his loins did not bless me, nor from the shorn wool of my young rams he would warm himself. If I waved my hand to and fro against the fatherless boy, when I would see need of my assistance in the gate, let my own shoulder blade fall from its shoulder, and let my own arm be broken from its upper bone. So I kind of went from to 22, but I like the section on Job. I like Job a lot. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, Matt Walsh, Mr. Catholic Christian icon, is showing us again how American Christians of the Republican Party oftentimes are quite vicious and hateful and resentful to the poor. EBT, if you're unfamiliar, it's food for the needy. And there's always going to be poor people. Even the Bible says that. Okay? There's over, I think, 51 verses or around that or a little above that talk about feeding the poor and helping the needy. It's funny, Matt Walsh spends a lot of time complaining and moaning and just nagging about the poor, yet his own Bible tells him not to resent them. He writes, EBT should just be abolished outright. Now, I believe the most recent data says 40 million Americans need it. Okay? And a lot of children depend upon it. Matt Walsh, he wants to be trad, right? Well, there's going to be, if you want women to be at home with their children, that means less income, which means in order to stay with their children, they might need some help with food. Make up your mind, Matt. What do you want, Mr. Trad? So to abolish that means to force women into the workforce. Not very traditional, is it? 95% of the people on the program could easily feed themselves. They just don't feel like making the effort. The other 5% can rely on charities, soup kitchens, food drives, churches, etc. The program is a disaster. Get rid of it. And now, there was a pop-up food bank during the lockdowns of COVID, and it was really helpful, and you could go to it. and get you some help. I went to it, we had to pay the rent. You gotta pay it. The bills didn't stop coming during the lockdowns, and unemployment did not even scrape the surface. The government forced us not to work, and we had to use our savings, what little there was, to survive. Okay? It decimated the economy, and so many people, it was just a nightmare economically for a lot. Tons of small businesses closed. And so a lot of the food drives were run super thin. Now, isn't this interesting? We just gave 40 billion, and I think 20 million of that came directly from the taxpayers themselves, the IMF, to Argentinians getting a bailout. All right? Obviously, we fund Is Not Real's genocide. We give money to Ukraine. We spent a lot of money in Afghanistan. Okay? I'm going to post, I think, later on today, the total on the community tab. Might include it in here as well. Not sure. But we spent a lot in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2021 and left a bunch of weapons behind. And we were told we're going to go in and we're going to nation build. Leave it better than we found it. Yeehaw. And guess what? Left it off worse. And then Biden put sanctions. Trump continued the sanctions. So nothing productive was built. They didn't get the American economy. We didn't put a bunch of Burger Kings and Foot Lockers over there. Okay? And the same people who had it got it back. So America didn't really get much except for trying to monopolize the poppy flower, and then the Taliban burned those flowers. So, I digress. But notice how often America spends money on war, but Matt Walsh is like, oh my gosh, someone's getting cans of corn, someone's getting some potato chips. Like, what? Again, the churches in some areas, they don't have the logistics and the time or, the ability to really get all that food. When I lived in Philadelphia with my mom, there was a Baptist church that allowed a pop-up food drive, which was kind. But there are lots of people. If you go state by state, I'm going to post Florida's, I think today or tomorrow, I'll post Florida's, how many people use food stamps, and they voted for Trump, and, look this up, Trump is the top person in history, in American history, to do the biggest cut towards food programs. While he's building a ballroom for the rich to party, and he didn't build the border wall. Okay? And a lot of charities, they take a cut. And there's too many rural people who are going to be left out. Okay? Soup kitchens, some of them are run by Catholics. I know some couple local ones. But if you have a mom with small children to get on the bus to go over there, that's quite difficult. There are even programs in California where you can get your food bank box delivered to your home if you qualify. Like if you have a disabled child or you have a child, I think it was under the year of 1. But they have a no strings attached food bank program. They have eggs, milk, rice, lentils, legumes, cabbage, carrots, potatoes. It's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there are lots of food programs in California. And California, I think, is the largest state to have, because we're a dense state. Got a lot of people, and they depend upon food programs. And if the government doesn't feed the people, you know who's going to feed the people? The cartels and the mob. Okay? I remember reading about the history, like when the Romans didn't have bread and the Egyptian grain wasn't coming, there were riots over bread. Most civilizations understand that if you starve your population and that you don't properly nourish your people, you're not going to have strong soldiers. And you're going to have a lot of infant mortality. And it's going to be a problem. Okay, North Korea starves their people unintentionally. But for sane people, they don't want gluttons and they don't want skeletons. They want a healthy, strong population. And the fat people who exist in America, if you look at our food additives and the chemicals in our food, there's so many disruptors in there that and also the medications people are on can also make them slow down their metabolism. It's not so simple as they just won't stop eating, although there are some. But there are also emotional eaters and mentally broken people who won't stop eating. I saw a post where a man who was about 600 pounds, he had to, something happened to him and they had to use a crane and stuff to get him out of his apartment. And I felt really sorry for him. Because that's a level of self-hatred that is really dark. I remember Brendan Fraser, he did this movie called The Whale. And it was kind of sad, But when you're talking to obese people who have that type of just mental illness, sure, there was that famous black rapper lady who got denied a Lyft ride because she was so fat. Yeah, there's gluttons who... It's a lifestyle. Like Lizzo, but Lizzo's losing weight. But for the most part, morbidly obese people, they got some mental issues there. And they're on a medication. They have some childhood trauma. And they're eating processed foods that have just destroyed their gut biome and don't provide a lot of nutrition and slow down their metabolism. And they're constipated, and they're not pooping, and it's a mess. So, to then think, well, the solution is to just forcibly starve people because you want to be a miser and a penny pincher, that really goes against so many verses in the Bible. And, again, there's also verses that talk about the alien resident in your land, the wanderer, the traveler, to share food with them. So it's not just only give food to this group of people, right? It's such a shame how vicious American Christians are. And Matt Walsh he's a curmudgeon. He's grumpy. And it's fascinating that the level of biblical literacy and application and American Christians is very low. Very low. And I can see why they really start to hate the Pope overall. And they hated the last Pope, even though they do weird things with the rainbow people. But the compassion that the popes try to have pisses off the Megatardians heavily, especially the Catholic ones. So, again, they should listen to their Bible and not hate the poor. And in Job 31, verse 32, it reads, "Outside no alien resident would spend the night. My doors I kept open to the path. If I like an earthling man, I covered over my transgressions by hiding my error in my shirt pocket. Because I would suffer a shock at the large crowd, or the contempt itself of families would terrorize me, and I would keep silent. I would not go out of the entrance." So notice how he's like the alien resident. Now, Matt Walsh hates illegals, even though they're Catholic. Many of them Christians. And the way they dehumanize non-white Christians and the wayfarer immigrant who's a Christian tells me that these people really do have a dark heart, a polluted heart, a distorted mind. And they're quite, to be frank, hypocrites. So, in Islam, we have plenty of hadith that talk about feeding the needy, helping the poor, not to be beggars ourselves unless we're absolutely in dire need. But because if we are persistent beggars, we'll show up on Judgment Day with the flesh off our face. That's in Riyadh Salihin. So we are to be strong workers, but we're not to despise the poor. Okay? Again, everyone has their provisions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah can snatch away our bounty quite easily. And we wouldn't even see it coming. And we could be at the bottom of the pyramid with those who we despise and look down upon. So, Matt Walsh, when people like him, will say, this is a Christian country. But then be like, hey, why do we have government programs to feed the poor? Ugh. It's sad. Truly sad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the needy and ease their suffering. Ameen. And then here's the example I was talking about, how Trump, Mr. Christian man sent by God to save America, he cut the biggest cut in the history of that program to feed the needy. So between 186 187 billion. Okay? Subhanallah. That is tragic. Astaghfirullah. And I mentioned Florida, and so 3 million people, they need those SNAP benefits in Florida. This is the election results for the most recent election, 2024, and 56% of the vote went towards Trumpo. So they voted for a guy who was going to cut off their food. And then I talked about how much was spent in Afghanistan, so you can see the numbers here. Billions. Billions. And some gets into the trillions. Alright, think about that. So, what's that Tupac line? No money for war, but not for the poor. Matty Walsh. How about you talk about the military-industrial complex before you complain and nag about people getting some cans of Campbell's soup and some whole wheat bread?